Good morning, everyone. We are with you today at the first Media Freedom Rapid Response webinar titled MFRR in Focus, and today's topic is Press Freedom Crisis in Slovenia. The Media Freedom Rapid Response and including with all partners will be holding the first of a new program. This is going to be a monthly webinar where we will provide a snapshot of the state of media freedom across the EU member states and candidate countries. And we will be highlighting our organization's work defending independent journalism and pluralistic media. There will be speakers from different MFRR partner organizations, and they will be providing news updates on the biggest press freedom stories of 2021 today. And today there are with us representatives from the ECPMF, International Press Institute, Free Press Unlimited, European Federation of Journalists, OBCT, Article 19, and finally, European Center for Press and Media Freedom. Our first speaker will be Antje Schlaf, who is coordinating the further development of mapping media freedom and is also analyzing our data regarding statistics. She will now give you an overview about some key statistics today. And please go ahead, Antje.
Thank you, Guusje. Yeah, also from me, a warm welcome to the webinar. I will share my screen, 1 second. So I will present you some key statistics from Mapping Media Freedom. Mapping Media Freedom is the platform where we document violations against press and media freedom. We do this in a very detailed and comprehensive manner, and this allows us to provide you some statistics. Within our MFRR project, we focus on European member states and candidate countries, and I will show you some key statistics about these. Altogether on our platform, we have nearly 6,000 incidents, we call them alerts, since 2014. And only this year for European member states and candidate countries, we have 399 incidents recorded. This data is from last Thursday, so now it's 405 alerts already. And we have more than 700 attacked persons or entities related to media. So within one attack, several persons can be attacked. So for example, being at a demonstration and being verbally and physically attacked at the same time for several journalists. So what type of attacks do happen? We have different types of attacks happen. They might also happen within the same incident. 1 out of 5 incidents, media actors were physically attacked. We also monitored 32 incidents where media actors got injured. So this is 8% of our documented incidents where media actors got injured doing their work. The majority of incidents contain verbal attacks. We have 176 alerts where people get verbally attacked. This includes intimidation, threatening, insult, abuse, harassment, as well as bullying, trolling. We also monitor attacks to property. So this includes equipment, personal belongings, but also attack to other property like cars or houses, as well as hacking. In nearly 1 out of 4 incidents, media actors faced legal consequences. And we also documented several attacks regarding censorship. What sources of attacks do we have? So which entities perform these attacks? So due to our comprehensive categorization of our incidents, we can tell you this. The main source are private individuals. So they make up more than 40% of the attacks we documented, but followed by police and state security, but also by governments and members of parliament or public officials and judiciary. And if we take state-related entities such as police, government, judiciary, or public authorities together, they also make up nearly 40% of our attacks documented. This is a worrying trend. Regarding context, we also document where do these attacks happen. We have several contexts, but these are the most important ones. We had lots of attacks happen during protest. It's 29% of the attacks happen during protests. And also, we have also very frequent attacks happening online digital. So this is hacking, but also online threatening, online harassment. And this is a number which became higher in 2021 compared to last year. So last year we had about 10%, and now it's already 16% of online harassment and so on. And COVID-19 is also a very important topic. We also monitor this. We had 105 attacks related to COVID-19. So more than 1 out of 4 incidents were related to COVID-19. So the main attacks happened during protests against anti-COVID measures. But there were also laws restricting press and media freedom, or people, journalists not being able to go to a press conference, several things brought up under the umbrella of COVID-19. This is all from my side. These are the main key statistics. If you want to know more, go to mappingmediafreedom.org, or if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you so much, Antje. And we are going to be turning back to you in the coming weeks with the updates on these numbers. And also, we would like to announce our viewers that in the coming days, we will be announcing new numbers based on what has happened until the end of September in our newsletter. And our next speaker is the Policy and Advocacy Officer from the Free Press Unlimited, Guusje Somer, who is working on safety of journalists. And Guusje, please update us on what has happened in 2021. Unfortunately, this year we have had already 2 journalist murders. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gurkan. Thank you for this introduction. And good morning, everyone from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Indeed, as Gurkan mentioned, I would like to talk briefly about our very serious concerns regarding the safety of journalists within the European Union, as already 2 investigative journalists were killed this year. I'm talking about the Greek investigative reporter Georgios Karaivas, who was shot dead on his way home from work in April 2021, as well as the Dutch crime journalist Peter R. de Vries, who was shot in the head here in the city center of Amsterdam in July 2021. The horrible killings of Karaivas and de Vries to us confirm a worldwide trend that journalists who work to shed light on abuses through their investigations, and in doing so call perpetrators to justice, are increasingly becoming victims of targeted violence. This trend that is connected to corruption and drug-related as well as financial crime is threatening media freedom in the European Union. And therefore, we believe that it can only be stopped by joint European efforts in these areas. I would like to share a little bit more with you on the killing of Peter R. de Vries, the most recent killing. Many details behind the murder of de Vries are still unknown, as the authorities are currently investigating the case. But an important detail is that the Office of Public Prosecution has suggested a link to de Vries' role in the so-called Marengo trial, which is a criminal case against leading members of a criminal organization involved in drug trafficking here in the Netherlands. So de Vries has been acting as an advisor to the key witness, whose lawyer had actually been killed almost 2 years ago in 2019 as well. However, although Peter R. de Vries seems to have been murdered because of his advisory role in the criminal process, he had been receiving threats for years related to his journalistic work about organized crime. And he was placed under police protection, or special police protection, I must say. So zooming out, one can distinguish a broader trend within the Netherlands with threats and harassments of journalists being on the rise. So de Vries' killing therefore has a very chilling effect, you could say, on the freedom of expression within the country and across Europe, especially because the Netherlands was until 2021 ranked in the top 5 of RSF's Press Freedom Index. And its safety protocol called Persveilig has often been presented as a good practice example. Therefore, the MFRR partners have published several statements about these 2 killings, so both Karaivas and Peter R. de Vries, in which we express our concern, our very serious concern about the impact that these killings have on press freedom in Europe. Threatening journalists deeply impacts the freedom to report on crime, on political affairs, and on other matters that are of public interest, and it may lead to self-censorship. Looking forward, I think in the coming months or in the coming period, what is crucial is the search for justice. Since the murder of Karaivas, although the Greek authorities have announced an investigation, no results have been presented yet. And concerning De Vries, it is encouraging to know that the Dutch authorities have announced new measures to improve the safety of journalists in the Netherlands. And also they have arrested 2 suspects soon after the assassination. But however, as for instance, the search for justice for Daphne Caruana Galizia has shown, it is often more challenging to find the masterminds behind such assassinations and to bring them to justice, to bring them to court. So in the coming period, this will be the main challenge, and us, the MFRR partners, we will continue to closely monitor the cases and to make sure that justice will be served. Thank you, Gurkan.
Thank you so much, Guusje, for this detailed analysis of the situation. And obviously, physical assault and murder of journalists is not the only thing that is targeting journalists in Europe, but also online safety of journalists is an important aspect. And in order to give further details about this, I would like to welcome on stage now the Communications and Project Officer from the European Federation of Journalists, Camille Petit, who is now going to talk about the Pegasus spyware scandal. And Camille, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gurkan. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, one other highlight of the summer was what we call the Pegasus Scandal, which was revealed by the French NGO Forbidden Stories in mid-July. So what's Pegasus in a nutshell? Pegasus is the name of a spyware that was developed by the Israeli surveillance company NSO. This spyware has the specificities to allow access to all data when it's installed on a phone, including audio, video, location, so basically all your life, without any activation or click required from the phone user. So officially, according to NSO, the spyware was designed to fight against terrorism and crimes. But Forbidden Stories discovered, thanks to leaked records, that the original use of the malware has been abused and diverted from its purpose, because they found that at least 180 journalists in 20 countries had their phones infected. And one of these countries is Hungary, where there is evidence that the Hungarian government illegally surveilled at least 6 journalists. So what does this tell us? First of all, it's a serious threat to the targeted journalists, to their safety, to their privacy, for them and for their sources. And second of all, it means that cyber surveillance tools are not sufficiently regulated within the EU. There is not enough safeguards for these technological weapons that can target actually any EU citizens. And here there is a democratic issue. So as Media Freedom Rapid Response, we reported all the cases of the targeted journalists in Europe on mapping media freedom that was presented by Antje earlier. So this includes the French and Belgian journalists, actually, were also targeted on the European soil, allegedly, respectively, by Morocco and Rwanda authorities, in addition to the Hungarian journalists I just mentioned, being spied by their own government. So what can we do and what can the EU do? So we as MFRR, we provide practical support to journalists, and in particular, one of them is cybersecurity tools and trainings, because even if it's not a new issue, I mean, we were providing this before the Pegasus scandal, but this story really tells us again that it's more than important that for journalists to take care of her digital safety and to protect him or herself, as well as the sources. At the European level and in all 27 member states, we absolutely need to implement regulations that would protect journalists and citizens from illegal surveillance. There is a new EU export control, actually, which came into force at the beginning of September, And among other things, it aims to strengthen controls on the international trade of so-called dual-use cyber surveillance tools. So we urge the EU member states to swiftly implement this important regulation. And of course, we absolutely need an independent investigation into the Hungarian authorities to identify also the extent of the use of the Pegasus spyware, whether more people were targeted and sanction actually any abuse. So that was a quick update on the Pegasus scandal. I'll put some links in the chat to our alerts and statements if you'd like to have more information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camille. And the next topic on our agenda is state capture. And specifically, we would like to look into the case of Poland, the LexTVN. And for this, we are turning to the International Press Institute's head of Europe Advocacy and Programmes, Oliver Money-Kryle. And Oliver, please, the stage is yours.
Yes, good morning, Gurkan. Thank you very much. Look, so Poland, they've had a busy summer. The Law and Justice Party have been trying to force through an amendment to the broadcasting law that would effectively force the largest independent broadcaster, TVN, for the US owners of TVN to sell its majority stake if it is passed. So on August 11th, the bill was put before the Sejm, the lower house, where it was passed after a very raucous debate and splits between the PIS and the coalition, the governing coalition parties. But it was passed by a slim majority and went up to the Senate on September the 10th. So a month later, the Senate rejected the bill, where PIS did not have a majority in the Senate. They rejected the bill and sent it back to the lower house, where it has been waiting for the last few weeks, and we're expecting it to be voted on again at any moment. We're not quite sure why there have been delays, but assuming that vote does take place and assuming that it is won, the bill would then go up to the president, Andrzej Duda, to be signed into law. Now, interestingly, Duda has in the last few weeks himself been expressing concern about the impact of the bill, particularly on its relations with the United States. And there is speculation, therefore, that Duda, despite being a PIS member and presidential representative, that he may veto the law. So what is the LexTVN law? Well, what it does is it amends the broadcasting law to ban companies based outside of the European Economic Area from owning a controlling stake on more than 51% of a media company in Poland. And this would effectively force the US company to sell its controlling stake. Now, PIS present this law as an effort to prevent countries such as Russia or China from getting influential stakes of Polish media. But in practice, it's not Russian or Chinese companies that will be affected, it's the US Discovery Channel. So that's the situation. Now, why is TVN24 being targeted? Well, TVN24 and its most popular news program, Fakty, are one of the sort of few remaining very popular independent news programs in an environment that is largely been taken over by pro-government quasi propaganda channels in Poland, particularly since the PIS election in 2015, when it instigated changes to the state broadcaster Telewizja Polska, and forcing the US Discovery to sell its stake would provide an opportunity for allies of PIS to purchase controlling interest in the company to change its editorial line. And the company, this is not such an unrealistic expectation, given that the company most likely to play that role would be the country's, Poland's largest energy giant, PKN Orlen, which last year decided it was necessary to diversify its business portfolio and start making purchases into the media into the media sector. So last December, it purchased the large regional media company Polska Press from the German Verlags Verlagsgruppe Passau, which gives it access to the 20 regional dailies and 500 online portals and 120 local magazines. Now, what you might ask is an energy giant doing investing in media? Well, that's a very good question. But what we do know is that since the purchase of Polska Press, there's been an editorial purge across the country. And this purge has been taking place despite efforts by the country's then human rights ombudsman, Adam Bodnar, to launch a complaint through the Polish courts, which led to the temporary suspension of the deal while it is being reviewed. The complaint is based on the question of the impacts of the purchase on media pluralism in the country, Bodnar making the case that it serious negative impact on media pluralism. Now that case is still being played out in the courts, and we do not expect it eventually to prevent the purchase. What we do know is that in the meantime, PKN Orlen has instigated quite serious editorial changes. Now, since this law has been going through Parliament, there is speculation that the country or the government has come under quite serious lobbying from the United States, and therefore there is speculation that eventually the PIS may be looking for some form of face-saving exit from the crisis. And that is also why there is a suggestion that Duda may well be looking for, may well veto the law in order to be able to extricate themselves from this otherwise dispute with the United States. So that's what we're hoping for. However, we cannot rely on that. And this is, we have to underline the seriousness of the situation, that should the law pass and should the US Discovery Channel be forced to sell its stake, and this would be a very serious victory for PIS in its efforts to squeeze out independent journalism in Poland.
Thank you so much, Oliver. And this was a very good summary of the situation. And in the next newsletter, we will be going further into detail of this situation. But due to our time limitations right now, we would like to go on to the OBCT's coordinator of the Resource Center on Media Freedom in Europe. Please welcome Paolo Rosa to speak about the Italian criminal defamation reforms.
Oh, thank you, Gurkan. Yeah, finally a good news, we could say, but in my short presentation, I'll try to highlight also the bad news inside the good news. Well, let's start with the good news. In June of this year, the Italian Constitutional Court abolished the Article 13 of the press law, which compelled judges to condemn journalists to prison if they had the crime of defamation through the press with accusation of fact. Well, prison remains as a possible punishment for defamation only in severe cases, including cases of hate speech and incitement to violence. So in this decision, the Constitutional Court wanted to balance the right of freedom of expression with the constitutional granted right of defending one's reputation. So on one side, journalists can be happy because this decision came thanks to a lawyer who was defending journalists in 2 trials in Bari and Salerno 5 years ago. So it took some time. The first ruling of the Constitutional Court was 1 year ago. That's why we can't see it as a fully good news, as the Constitutional Court in June 2020 stated that the Parliament should tackle this issue and should proceed to a comprehensive reform of the press law and the press and the articles of the penal code related to press. But it took 1 year, the Parliament did nothing. And that's where the MFRR can can intervene maybe with our advocacy activity, with our analysis, with our monitoring, because as it has been stated from the colleagues as well, states are often enemies to press freedom. An example in this situation of the decision of the Constitutional Court is that the government, the Italian government, submitted an opinion to the decision before the Constitutional Court ruled. And in its opinion, the government affirmed that defamation should remain as it is, punished with prison. This was an official paper given to the Constitutional Court, while in the meetings with the Italian Federation of Journalists, the government stated that they wanted to reform laws and to defend freedom of the press. So these contradictions just force us to intervene, to advocate, and to continue monitoring the situation, not believing to the good news only. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paola. Well, at least there is a bit of good news in today's webinar. And the next in our program is Barbara Strukel and her interview. She is the editor-in-chief of the Slovenian press agency. So we are now going to watch her interview, and I will be then passing my floor to Jamie Weissman, the IPI Advocacy Officer for Europe. Jamie?
Thanks, Gökhan. Yeah, as we've heard, there are serious issues facing independent media across the EU right now. And one of the flashpoints that we haven't really mentioned so far is in Slovenia, a country which for a long time was considered a relative safe haven for media. But right now, there's a lot of issues involving the Slovenian press agency, which this year marked its 30th anniversary. It's really not been a year to celebrate, though. For more than 270 days now, the agency has been out without state funding, guaranteed to it under two separate laws. And this means that if some form of funding is not reinstated immediately, the STA could face insolvency in a matter of weeks. This would mean 80 journalists would lose their jobs, and a central part of the country's media ecosystem could be silenced. So yeah, to hear an update about what's happening at the STA, we spoke with Barbara Strukel, editor-in-chief of the Slovenian press agency. Hi, Barbara, and thanks for being here with us for the first MFRR in Focus. What is the latest situation at the Slovenian press agency and the situation with its Director General?
So yesterday, Director General Mr. Veselinovic resigned after turning down a draft public service agreement proposed by the Government Communications Office, ECOM. Well, that brought STA in another uncertain position, because we actually don't know how we will survive next month.
And the kind of how long the financial situation right now, how long will the money last until the agency faces financial collapse?
Well, actually, the October is the last month that the agency will be able to pay the salaries and the payments for the freelance workers. But probably it will be not able anymore to pay the obligations, other financial obligations. So actually, we are really on the brink, on the verge of insolvency.
It seems like a very dire situation. We've seen the warnings, obviously, from the unions as well. I mean, how is morale right now in the newsroom amongst the staff and the journalists?
Well, it's really hard. Yesterday we had, let's say, a meeting in the newsroom, and it was really emotional. We are not only facing mass departures of the journalists. Let's say before this sad saga began, we have about one leave per year average, but now from the beginning of this year, we already lost like 10 journalists, which is approximately, I don't know, 12% of the total workforce. And people are worried, unmotivated. There is a sense of apathy and desperation. So it's really not a rosy atmosphere now in our newsroom.
I guess obviously in the background, these negotiations with the Government Communication Office, how are they going? Has there been any progress made?
Well, STA and EUCOM spent actually months. I think that the first negotiation round was in July, in discussing a public service agreement that the government says it's needed for resumption of the public financing of the agency. But actually, not only that the agreement is not needed, since the two laws set the legal basis for providing a payment, but also the draft of this agreement discussed by STA and EUCOM proposed that the number of the news items and photos, which are part of the public service, is supposed to be billed per piece every month, regardless of the complexity of the news, regardless of the amount. So this is something which is actually unacceptable from journalistic point of view, that your news are actually only pieces which are paid by the government.
I suppose there are concerns here around the commercial and economic issues, but are there still concerns about STA's editorial and kind of management and independence as well?
Of course, because one way is this, let's say, financial basis, which is actually not strong enough through this draft of this agreement. But as we also said yesterday at our newsroom meeting, we as journalists, we cannot accept this module of payment to be paid per piece. And I think that the government should continue this broader approach to the STA, because it's not only a subscriber, it's also the owner, and should have a wider context of having a national press agency, because, as you know, Slovenia is a very small media market and have a lot of difficulties. So the government, as a representative of the founder, which is the state of Republic of Slovenia, should have this broader aspect in front when this agreement, if needed, is shaped.
I mean, like you said, you know, the situation now seems completely unprecedented, that we're now at the position where, you know, a national news agency in a member state of the European Union is on the verge of bankruptcy. I mean, in your view, what are the reasons that, you know, we've got to this stage so far along?
Well, we are not only desperate, but also disappointed very much, because also within EANA Group, European News Alliance, we actually don't have the similar case, and we also feel strong support from the EANA. But what are the reasons? Actually, if we look to the whole process, which is going on for almost a year, we can see that the government often changed the narrative. What are the reasons, and why should the public financing is withdraw? So I think that they try to actually gain control over the STA, and maybe they didn't believe that we will hold for so long, and now due to this financial pressure, which is now so immense that we are really on the brink, is, I think, the latest and the last milestone, which probably we will not pass.
You said that you kind of felt support from EANA, but what have you kind of judged from your position as editor-in-chief, the response from the European Union, European Commission and its officials in this situation? you think they've done enough to kind of ensure that this contractual dispute is resolved and the funding recommences?
Well, I think that, let's say, officials in the EU, or at least the one who are in charge of, they have fully understanding of the situation. And yes, of course, we feel that the strong support, and we are grateful for it. But unfortunately, there is probably a lack of mechanisms which could help the media, not only the STA, because probably we are not the first and the last in such situation, that will help the media with some very direct help, you know, like maybe that the EU should think about the establishment of a special fund which could help media in such position, just to get over this and will later, let's say, the money will be returned or something. Because I didn't mention that STA already launched court procedures, but we are afraid that all these procedures will took too long, and we will not be alive anymore at the time when the court will decide. We are sure that in our favor.
Well, thanks very much for joining us. We hope that the situation resolves itself very soon, and our organizations will continue to push to make sure that STA's independence and its financial stability are ensured. So thanks very much.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye.
Thank you. The editor-in-chief of the STA there. So to kind of discuss a few of these issues a little bit further and look in more depth at the situation for media freedom in Slovenia right now, we're joined by Petra Tušek, president of the Slovenian Journalists Association, Lenart Kučić, an investigative journalist at the Slovenian media outlet Podčrto, and Renata Schroeder, director of the European Federation for Journalists. Petra, are you with us?
Yes, I am with you, but I cannot start the video now because it is written that it's unable to start. Maybe.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay, and Lenart as well, we can see you? Okay.
Okay, now I'm with you with the video as well.
Great, let's jump straight in. Petra, I'll come to you first. We've just heard quite concerning kind of update from the STR. There seems to be so many issues for media freedom in Slovenia right now. And of course, this is happening while the country is heading the rotating presidency of the European Union. From the perspective of your association, what are some of the other kind of key concerns right now for independent journalism, for journalist safety, and particularly the public broadcaster as well?
Yes, good day to everyone, and thank you for the invitation as well. I would rather be with you in some other circumstances, but unfortunately, months of deterioration of media freedom are still going on, and it's quite intense and still turbulent, and I think it's going to be even worse. As we heard from Barbara Štrukelj from the Slovenian press agency, this is really the core problem in Slovenia at the moment. And all the interpretations that the problem is actually being solved, and all the manipulations of the government that is trying hard to conclude the contract is just a misleading of public and trying to give the impression that the actual fault is actually on the STA part, on the leadership, and of course on journalists as well. What we are afraid of is that this is just the first step. We are looking into it, that after and if the Slovenian press agency falls, and if the bankruptcy is really the scenario we are going to face, that this is just the first media that is going to be endangered, and that the path is then open also to the others. Journalists are really trying to work professionally as they can, but they are facing losses of journalists already, and they are weakened so much that the severe pressure is then even harder then. We tried also with the donation campaign, public really helped, and now that we can see that the payment is not going to be assured, we again remembered people that the account at our association is still open, but we're not going to do the same donation campaign, because we believe that the public now thinks that the government has to do what is obliged by the law, so that people cannot take the costs that have to be taken by the government. So we expect the government to pay, and we cannot expect from the public to pay the obligation of the state. As I was saying, that we are afraid that this is just the first step. We can also notice that the pressures upon radio and television Slovenia, so the core of public broadcasting, is strengthening. These attempts of government to take the control under public broadcasting these are still in progress. We have maybe a little bit good news in these processes, that the court didn't agree with the latest changes of two members of the surveillance board. So it stopped this procedure, and the appeal is not possible in this way. So the court is working. I believe that we are somehow circulating with all these decisions that are made by government, and then with the processes that are going on court, different court levels. What is worrying in the case of Slovenian press agency is that the time is not really in favor of them, because it is lasting too long. It hasn't been discussed not even once at the court about the first payment for the for the January. So just for one salary, just so that we see that this is really going very slowly. What can also be mentioned is that the wider hostile climate against journalists is really problematic, and it is still worsening. We can see the protests are becoming also the questions for the security of journalists is being raised, because journalists are attacked at the process by anti-vaxxers. And as you know, and you probably noticed, there was also an attack in the TV studio lately. So they broke into the RTV studio. So we can see these processes that the security is more and more an issue for the journalists as well. So what we were claiming last month, and also what your mission in Slovenia has found out, is that all these pressures, all these attacks that were verbally, harassments online, assaults and so on, are really getting materialized form. So we can see that the step where someone provokes someone, so all the provocative and all the insulting manners of politicians are now moving into practice. So this is what I think is very problematic. We launched the platform where we register attacks on journalists, our association, and there are already 24 cases just this year registered on the platform. These are just the cases that journalists also consent, and they are also ready to report. So there are many more others. So there are just those who we estimate, and also journalists agree that we put on the platform. So I think that the international support of the community has really been important, but as Barbara stated, maybe it hasn't been enough. So the solidarity and all the help, all the warnings really helped us to raise the awareness, to see the case. But I think that they are obviously not effective enough, because we are now at the stage that some other moves also from the politicians, from the European Union should be done. So combined with all the other changes in media landscape that probably Leonard can talk more about, also about the ownership changes that are going on at the moment, especially in the print media, we can say that we are more vulnerable and fragile. We can be solider, but we maybe won't be solid enough if we don't have another one solution, maybe something that give us something to move with forward.
Thanks so much, Petra. And yeah, Lena, I could just bring you in. Obviously, these kind of issues around STR, the public broadcaster, attacks on journalists by anti-vaxxers are the most kind of visible and obvious cases, threats to media freedom right now. But in your research, you kind of have looked a little bit behind the scenes. So I wanted to ask you how this kind of issues around STR, around government control over the public broadcaster, fed into a kind of wider backdrop of pluralism in Slovenia right now, of government interference, and what your research has kind of shown about these topics. Sorry, you're muted. And if you could just keep your intervention, we don't have much time, just a couple of minutes.
Sure. I mean, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, those things are mostly symptoms of some broader stuff, because our investigation has shown that there are some systemic problems that are here since the independence, and they go way across, this left and right spectrum. Every government has many options to abuse its powers to influence or control the media in Slovenia. So it has strong influence on the state and public and private media companies through state-owned companies and public tenders. Then there's huge problem for using public money for political propaganda. There's really weak regulation that's unable to prevent media concentration. And there is absolutely no real protection from the new means of propaganda like astroturfing and social media smearing campaigns, etc. So as we've seen in some recent example, astroturfing is a huge issue. There is a political battlefield on social media, and then the media system is reinforcing this battlefield. There is increased influence of foreign Hungarian-made owners that are close to the ruling Hungarian party Fidesz. For example, the second or third biggest commercial television, Planet TV, has been taken over by Hungarian company TV2 that belongs to the so-called pro-Fidesz media circle. And Hungarian investors also own pro-SDS TV, Nova TV, and there is some new activities on this pro-government media network. Then there are some other pressures, like some critical media lost some public funding for their activities. There are strong, let's say, suspicions that state advertising is being channeled to some media outlets that are close to the political parties. There are slap cases, etc. And as Petra also mentioned, maybe because of the crisis, maybe because the time is right, but there's been a takeover of two important regional newspapers, Primorska Novica and Večer, and they allegedly became the part of a private media network that includes most of the magazine press, commercial radio and TV stations, political magazines, etc. And our investigation has shown that this network is problematic because it's operated through proxies to bypass media legislation and to increase its media portfolio despite this anti-concentration clauses. And yeah, in this political sense, they are considered not to be pro-government, but their activities are very problematic, and states, well, nobody's doing anything to prevent it really. And we also seen some already some cases of censorship. For example, in major national daily Delo, they reportedly removed a commentary about literally from the printing press because it was critical to the government. And there, it's just not the only such example when editors wanted to protect business interests of their owners, which is also very problematic in Slovenia. But to sum up, this COVID crisis has really shown that party propaganda is, I think, has been using like a lot of resources and last 3 years for spreading the message that there is no journalism, there is no media, there are no journalists, there are only leftists and rightist activists. And as a consequence, well, there is declining public trust in the media, of course. And as we've seen, you know, this rise of anti-vax movements and strong hesitancy for getting vaccinated, probably has a strong correlation with this, that the public simply, you know, after 3 years of fierce propaganda battles over media, simply doesn't trust media anymore. And the consequences are dire, as Petra mentioned. There are more and more attacks on journalists during the protests. It can be either COVID protests or political protests. But yes, I mean, it's really, it will be really hard, you know, because the politics has been trying so hard to dismantle every possible trust in the media to actually give it back. And as we know, it's crucial for every society to function, to has this basic trust in these sources of information.
Thanks, Lena. Yeah, I think a really key point you mentioned there was that a lot of the kind of issues now we're seeing are, symptoms of weaknesses within the media market, whether that's around transparency or, you know, safeguards for independence of public broadcasters. Renata, I want to give the last word to you here. The MFRR obviously held our mission to Slovenia online in May and June 2021. What were some of the kind of key conclusions, and what would your message be to stakeholders on the ground there about STR and media freedom in Slovenia right now?
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Petra and Nenad for your updates. Unfortunately, not very promising, but I'm not surprised. I know there have been letters by the Commission, there has been noise by us, there has been a lot of noise by all of you, and I would like to congratulate you again on your constant professional behavior, on the crowdfunding you have been doing, on trying to involve really the public at large. And I think we have all been impressed that you in Slovenia are doing great. It is different than Hungary, it's different than Poland. We have been saying that. And from the mission I have attended, I also have to say, besides what Leonard said, that journalists are being put into the polarized societies, into right and left, there still is professional journalism. And that seems to be really reflected by STAR, by the public service media, which for that very reason is being utterly attacked at the moment. And I think we need to get more attention from the European Parliament specifically. We had already talks to them. You may know we have an advocacy mission on the ground in Ljubljana in 3 days, and afterwards we will talk to the European Parliament. The European Commission is aware that these letters don't work. That's why we are working on a Media Freedom Act, which has enforcement capabilities, which has teeth to make possible that something what has happened in Slovenia cannot happen in the future. We have seen it in Hungary, we have seen it in Poland, it hasn't worked. Slovenia seems to be going in a way in the same direction, even though it's not that bad there. So we need much more enforcement, we need much more acts. We will continue to join you there, we will be there, we will continue what we have been doing. But it's true that unless you have a change of government, it will be very difficult to change that. And there we still have hope. We know that there will be elections, but we need to do much more to save public interest journalism at a larger scale, and that not only in Slovenia. And I know time is almost off, Jamie, so I stop here. If you have another question, go ahead.
No, thanks so much, Renata. And like you said, yeah, the delegation from IPI, EFJ, and the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom will be in Ljubljana on October 6th. So we'll be sure to raise all of these issues and more when we're there. So thanks to Renata, thanks to Petra, thanks to Leonard for joining us, and I'll hand back to Gökhan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you so much to our panelists. And today we have been leading the first episode of MFRR in Focus with the specific title of Press Freedom Crisis in Slovenia. Today, the Media Freedom Rapid Response held its first of a new program of monthly news webinars. We have been providing a snapshot of the state of the media freedom across EU member states and candidate countries. And aside from the MFRR partner representatives and panelists' speeches, in the past month, there was also the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen's State of the Union address, where she has announced the recommendations for safety for journalists and the Media Freedom Act for Europe. Obviously, we will be following these developments and announcements closely in the coming months. And let us close by announcing that on a monthly basis from now, we will be airing monthly news webinars, podcasts, and also we will be issuing newsletters. So do not forget to sign up. And thank you for watching us.